My dear people, this is a very critical time for our country. You spoke as a people in the last election, expressing your preference for peaceful change. I ask you now to be calm and to be prepared to express again your power as a people.
In 1986, from Feb 22 to 25, millions of Filipinos collectively decided they were tired of the oppression dealt to them during the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. They walked down EDSA calling for the end of Marcos' reign under martial law. The peaceful revolution was successful and Marcos fled the country, leading to a new era of freedom for the Philippine people. Sadly, the damage had already been done during the martial law era.
Kayo ay lumaban sa gobyerno. May karapatan man kayo, may katwiran man kayo o hindi. Sa maraming militar, yan ay labag na sa batas.
Press freedom can never be compatible with a dictatorship.
So it presumes that he knows everything, he's already caught.
Our country has been suffering to recover from a collective trauma from the events ever since. In celebration of the EDSA Revolution today, I want to talk about collective trauma, how it's seen in the Philippines because of Ferdinand Marcos' actions, and lastly, the healing process from collective trauma and how we've been trying to heal from it.
Kailan ka pa lalaya bayan?
For a brief history leading up to the revolution, Ferdinand Marcos, who had implemented martial law in 1972 under the pretenses of protecting the country from communist insurgents. Using martial law, he extended his reign and power as president of the Philippines for nearly over a decade. In the latter years of the presidency, one of his chief political opponents, Ninoy Aquino, was assassinated upon his return from exile to the United States.
So it was a mixed feeling of anger, frustration, disbelief, and how these horrible things can happen in our country in broad daylight.
Leading to a large public outcry against the administration at the time, which had ruled over the country under the enactment of martial law for over that decade. With the subsequent chaos and controversy surrounding the 1986 snap election, along with the countless other mounting cases of oppression from years under the Marcos administration, the people took to the streets to protest and rally under the banner of Aquino's widow, Corazon Cory Aquino, leading to the final ousting of the administration and an end to the Marcos dictatorship and years of atrocities, corruption, and human rights violations. In celebration, the People Power Revolution became a national holiday, having been a non-working public holiday since 2002. Even so, the Marcoses have regained a foothold in politics and remain a fairly prominent political family to this day.
Dumating ako sa lungsod sa panahon ng kaguluhan, ng laganap ang gutom. Naratnan ko ang mga tao sa panahon ng himagsikan at naghimagsik akong kasama nila.
Collective trauma is a cataclysmic event that shatters the basic fabric of society. Examples of this could range from large-scale tragedies that lead to horrific loss of life, such as war or World War II, famines, or any large-scale disease such as the current COVID-19 pandemic. Other examples could be the result of some kind of crisis of meaning where constructs or concepts in the social order may end up being overturned and where people's understandings of them may be challenged. Compared to generational trauma, which is primarily concentrated on a single family throughout its various generations as it perpetuates over time, collective trauma is a society-wide phenomenon that may affect people's way of lives on a far larger scale and greater level than a singular family unit. I've already said this trauma originates from Ferdinand Marcos, but how exactly is this trauma seen to begin with?
We have been spending more than what we are earning, and so we have this economic crisis. And number two, we would say that there is also a political crisis because of the fact that we have no stable government.
Some call Ferdinand's reign the golden age for our economy, infrastructure, and quality of life. But by the period's end, the country was experiencing a debt crisis, extreme poverty, and severe underemployment. It all started when the Philippines economy went through a crisis under martial law in the beginning of the 80s. For example, the devaluation of pesos led to the local currency decline by 63% towards dollar bills. As a result, it led to the 59% inflation rate by July 1984 and doubling the prices of commodities. From 1961 to 1986, the debt had increased from $360 million in 1961 to $28.26 billion in 1986. This shows that the debt had increased 77 times in nominal terms and 24 times in real terms. While it's good to acknowledge impressive infrastructure that was built during the Marcos period, such as the Philippine Heart Center, the Lung Center of the Philippines, etc., development led by debt-based growth can actually inhibit the country from experiencing long-term benefits. For example, there could be enough spare funds to provide free and/or universal health care. In addition, it can also help future generations to not feel burdened knowing that they must also pay for the accumulating debt within the country. While it's seemingly impossible to have a debt-free country, it can provide the Philippine economy to at least gradually grow and recover. When Marcos first took office in 1965, 4 out of 10 families were in poverty. By the end of his regime and the end of martial law in 1985, this ratio increased to 6 out of 10 families that were poor. Some regions had as much as 7 out of 10 families below the poverty line. There was also a sharp decrease in the daily wages of workers. Both skilled and unskilled saw a sharp decrease by the end of martial law in 1985, from earning 127 pesos and 89 pesos respectively in 1962. Their daily wage dropped to 35 pesos and 23 pesos in 1986. At the same time, prices tripled towards the end of martial law. What you could buy for 100 pesos in 1978 spiked up to 350 pesos in 1986. Most grim out of all of these, I have to warn, is that according to the documentation of the Amnesty International and other human rights groups in the Philippines, there were a total of 3,257 known extrajudicial killings, 35,000 documented tortures. There are a lot that are not documented. I do have to put that as a side note. And over 70,000 people incarcerated. All of these people are known victims. There are countless more that suffered and were killed during the Marcos regime. With all that said, healing from collective trauma is different due to its widespread nature, but it's still possible. Our country's collective experiences help determine our mindset, our growth, and our relationships with one another as a community. The state of well-being in our population as a whole holds so much influence over how we move forward. Without healing, our history of trauma can hinder that ability to build relationships, to envision a better future, and to access our collective strength in seeking the transformation we want to see in our country. So, how can we promote collective healing in the Philippines? The key to this is through collective resilience. Collective resilience is the ability of a community to rebound from the traumatic experiences they've encountered in life. There's a beautiful innate capacity within us to bounce back from tragedies. It can be difficult to do by yourself though, and it takes a lot of collective effort to do it on a larger scale in society, but it is still possible. One way to promote this resilience is through education. To educate and pass on stories to the generations that haven't experienced martial law. It is in the integration of these lessons and anecdotes from the past that can drive an individual's passion Education is also important because we are not only aiming to heal from the trauma ourselves, but we are also preventing future traumatic experiences that are similar from happening. Collective power is another key aspect of building resilience. It takes a team of effort to fight back against the government oppressors that hold so much power over the country. It takes collective power to build a voice and to be able to rely on one another. Take the people power revolution, for example, as I've been mentioning in the video. It was actually a huge step in collective resilience that demonstrated the strength of a unified people together. Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, yes, that is her actual name, it's really cool, a scholar on Native American historical trauma, identified 4 key stages of collective healing: confronting it, understanding it, releasing the pain of it, and then transcending it. Some ways of healing that are being practiced here in the Philippines are remembrance. February 25th is the day the Philippines remembers what happened in EDSA and what happened in the years before it. The stories of the time are told by survivors from person to person to recount the events, and activists often rally and make different awareness campaigns to educate others. Other creative projects have also been undertaken in order to spread awareness of the events of martial law, such as the recent film entitled The Kingmaker, which I highly recommend to you all. But healing is still difficult as the scars continue to be poked at with historical revisionists who distort the history behind the topic, making it hard to make analysis videos like these and other in-depth ways, scholarly or otherwise, to talk about the events of the time. The removal of Philippine history as a mandatory subject in 2013, making it difficult for us to learn from the mistakes of the past, and even the possible repeat of history with the son of Ferdinand Marcos currently running for president, and currently, based off recent statistics, is currently leading the polls. Healing is very possible, but if we forget what caused the pain in the first place, then we can't grow from the experience. To the Philippines, I encourage you all to please don't forget where the pain came from to begin with. Let's learn from the mistakes of the past and do our part to educate and help the nation heal together. So, thank you all for watching. Normally, I don't ask of this from my viewers, but if you could share this video with friends or families to help spread education about the topic, I would highly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to the channel to show support, and I hope you all have a great day ahead. Thank you all again for watching.
Man may layang lumipad, tulungin mo at pumipiglas. Bayan pa kayang sakdal dilag, ang limag na sang makaalpas. Pilipinas kung minumutyat, pugad ng luha ko't galita. Aking natikay, makita kang sakdal laya.